Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So today we're joined with Jo Dickinson, who's a hygienist and also has completed to be a smoking cessation advisor. Her topic today is no more but supporting smokers to quit. So I'll hand you over to Jo, and also at the end, you'll be redirected to a survey in order to collect feedback and also for us to be able to send out your CPD certificates as well. So I'll hand you over to Jo now. If you have any questions, pop them in either the chat box or the Q&A box, and I'll monitor them and we will get to them at the end. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So I want to say thank you first of all to the BADT and to Stancy Action for providing us with the platform to support this. Without these, a lot of these webinars wouldn't take place. So really grateful to the industry and to the associations for doing these sort of things. Okay, so a bit of housekeeping. Aims, these will appear on your certificate, but just to keep GDC happy. And the objectives. So we will be touching on e-cigarettes. A lot of people ask me a lot of questions at the end of these sessions about them, so I've delegated a bit of this webinar, this presentation about e-cigarettes. So if you've got any questions, rather than use the chat, if you can send them through the question screen, that'll be good, and then Chris will fill them at the end. So moving on, I thought there's just a couple of slides on this. I think we're all a bit bored, to be honest with you, about this. But basically, the WHO put out a position statement with regards to COVID-19 and suggested that smokers take immediate steps to quit using the known methods such as quit lines, mobile text messaging programs, and nicotine replacement therapies. No mention there of e-cigarettes, interestingly. The thing in blue at the bottom, that is a link that you could go to actually find the whole document there. What I'm going to do with all of those, because I know you'll be scrambling for phones and things, or saving screen buttons, I've got them all on a page right at the end. So if you want to print your screen right at the end, you'll be able to capture all of those. Okay. And I think it's quite interesting that if we are moving to a place now where scaling is going to be limited, I mean, all of us have been moving towards a place where oral hygiene is discussed more, motivating patients has become paramount over and above clinical removal of deposits. So I think our ability to deliver high quality and effective support to patients is becoming more and more important as we're starting to understand, the influence the host response is playing in a lot of conditions. Okay, there is some research going on at this. You will know that some of the newspapers are claiming that, nicotine could see the end of COVID-19. Yeah, it's all blown out of proportion. There has been some studies. We're looking at work from China, and there's some studies both in the US and France going on at the moment. The bottom line is more research is needed. It came about because they wondered if nicotine might influence the way COVID-19 was adhering to the cell linings in the airway. However, they are saying categorically that there is a lot more harm from somebody taking up nicotine replacement products to be achieved than there is from any benefit in actually using them. So if patients come back at you about this, and what we do know is that smokers are far more likely to have a more severe case of COVID, and they are more likely to be hospitalized and more likely to need intubation. So this is the reason why the WHO made that statement. Okay. There's a nice little blog there as well, actually, that the BMJ put out discussing that. So again, that'll appear at the end on your final page. So when I refer to smoking, I mean all tobacco users. It's just a slip of the tongue, and it's a longer phrase, all tobacco users, because anybody who uses tobacco, whether they chew it, smoke it, whatever, will become addicted and are exposing themselves to all the harmful carcinogens and all the other things, including water pipes. And incidentally, a water pipe is the equivalent of smoking 25 cigarettes if you were to use it for 20 minutes. So Tobacco is a massive public health issue. It's costing us a small fortune, and it beggars belief that there's not more investment in supporting smokers to quit. Either way, quite often we are left ourselves with sort of dealing with patients who are presenting with oral health problems that has been significantly influenced by the use of tobacco. So just a quick reminder, I know I'm telling my granny to suck eggs here. We know there's a heap of studies, these are just some of my favourites, actually demonstrating that we've got a patient that's a smoker, they're more likely to present with periodontal disease, that periodontal disease is more likely to be severe, and it's a lot harder to get any sort of resolution if they continue to smoke. So it would make sense that smoking cessation becomes part of our treatment. There's rarely any good news at all, is there really, with smoking? I know you've probably all done your periodontal classification, but if you refer back, you'll remember that smoking is not a distinct diagnosis, but it is a descriptor. And I know you've probably done lots and lots of these webinars now, but I found these are really quite nice by a guy called Jensen. They're available on YouTube, and it really is just a quick, brief summary. So if you're starting to get a little bit confused by it all, but he points out quite categorically that tobacco use, the current amount that somebody's using, should be recorded in clinical notes, and that we use smoking as a descriptor, as a modifying factor in periodontal disease. Another one of my favourite gum gods, Stefan Renvert, and he said this many, many times now. The BSP 2014, this is a direct quote: "If you want your implants to succeed, you must treat the periodontal disease and create a smoking cessation program for your patients." I've done quite a few of these sort of presentations to people, sort of face to face around the country, and talking to people sort of before and after the presentations, the biggest concern is, well, first of all, that they're worried about that patient-clinician relationship, but also actually having time to sit down with patients, which is reasonable. I'll come to that in a moment, how a lot of this can be achieved very, very quickly if need be. My argument is, if somebody's prepared to invest a lot of time and a lot of money in having an implant, it should be a foregone conclusion that if they are smokers, then an effective smoking cessation plan is offered to them as part of the treatment. Whether that be a referral to an external clinic, or whether somebody within the practice takes up some of the training and provides that support, I really feel if we pay lip service to this, sort of say to patients, well, look, here in your information pack is some advice: you must give up smoking, or the chances of the implant failing are higher if you remain a smoker. Or worse, which I've heard, is, well, just give it while we're placing the implant, then everything will be fine thereafter. I think we are leaving ourselves open to litigation somewhere down the line. And I think if you're working in practice with a team that are placing implants, now might be a good time to actually say, look, as a team, we maybe need to up our game on smoking cessation support. Maybe we need a little bit more training. Maybe we need a better protocol within the practice. And maybe one of us needs to volunteer to be the smoking cessation support person. And I think because everybody's sort of sat at home now not doing a great deal, or most people sat at home not doing a great deal, this is a good time to start doing that training. We can do an awful lot online. We can start talking about protocols and things online. So I'm hoping at the end of this you'll feel a bit more inspired to speak to your team leads and improve things in your workplace. If you ever read any of the information given by non-dental people about the effect of tobacco in the mouth, they place this at the top of the list, which I find quite interesting. It is horrendous. My own grandfather died of smoking-related oral cancer, and it is hideous. It's horrible to watch the suffering that they go through. But for me, it's still much further down the list. For me, we've got a lot more people with periodontal disease, a lot more patients opting for implants. And I think that sometimes those issues get overlooked by the wider medical community, if you like. However, after saying that, it's still absolutely crucial that we do speak to patients, we do screen for oral malignancy, and we do highlight the fact that there is a risk there. Okay, so what are our guidelines? I'm going to go through this quickly. I personally hate slides, they've got lots and lots of words on them, so I'm going to whip through this fairly quickly. I just want to do a bit of tweaking here. Okay, so health professionals. Most of us are doing this. but you need to be jotting down, as was said earlier, exactly how much they're using. Be very, very careful with smokers, because a lot of smokers are what we call oscillating smokers. They might have given up in October and told you they're an ex-smoker. Come November, things are different and they're back smoking again. So you need to be asking them fairly regularly, or get them to fill in on the medical history screen what they're smoking, how much they're smoking, so you've got an up-to-date record. You'll also find people who are using e-cigarettes, classing themselves as non-smokers, fair enough, but you do need to jot that down if they are relying on the e-cigarettes, should we say. We should all be referring, and this I feel gets paid lip service to. This is actually our guidelines from NICE. We should be referring to the evidence-based smoking cessation service. So not necessarily to the hypnotist down the road, although I'm not knocking hypnotists, but we are supposed to be referring to the NHS service where we can. And I'll talk through that a little bit in this presentation as well. So if you discover that a patient does smoke, your response should be moving towards referring them on, okay, as well as jotting it down. Okay, and we should also be given training, all right, this thing called brief advice, or very brief advice. And every dental clinician, in fact, every dental team member really should be doing this training. It's completely free. You'll see at the bottom there, that's the link to it. It's provided by the NCSCT. They have a lot of training on there. So once you've done your very brief advice, you might choose to move on and do one of the other training modules. Again, all online, well, most online, I should say. Very easy to do, and at the moment, they're all completely free. NICE also tell us that we should remind at every suitable opportunity of the health benefits of stopping. One of the reasons I like talking to hygienists and therapists is because I feel they have built in them a natural part of their personality that makes them very good at delivering smoking cessation support. They tend to build up a rapport with patients. They tend to very empathetic towards patients. They read patients very well, and they know exactly what to say and when to say it. Okay. Across the board, all the people who are providing smoking cessation support, not all of them have those sort of qualities, if you like. And reminding somebody every suitable opportunity, for me, flies in the face of everything we understand about behaviour change. So although we do need to be reasonable about this, we may want to, maybe with one patient once a year, sort of address the issue. Certainly not every time they sit up and rinse after doing treatment. But I think hygienists and therapists can read patients to the point where they know when is the ideal point to speak to them. 70% of patients who smoke want to quit, and all smokers do expect to be spoken to about their smoking habit. And believe it or not, 50% of quit attempts are made spontaneously. All right, so they don't go through the pre-contemplation stage, they automatically decide they want to quit. So, and quite often this follows speaking to somebody, a health professional normally, and generally if it's been about their own personal health, those are the criteria where often these quit attempts are made. So you are quite powerful, right? And I think if it's delivered in the right way, I think you will probably have more impact on that individual's life than anybody else. And we'll go over sort of building up skills and remaining confident. We know that nagging doesn't work. It definitely doesn't work for interdental cleaning. We know there's various tricks we develop as an individual and as a team to sort of speak to different people on different levels. I think it's absolutely crucial now we all step up our game, if you like. And as I said earlier, we offer brief advice and then they get referred. Okay. Now, if they don't want to be referred, then this is where you step in and offer them the brief advice with the training that you'll have online, and then give them ongoing support. Now, the ongoing support literally is all those motivational skills, all that empathy that you show to people, the thing you do on a day-to-day basis. It comes very, very naturally to you. But they will also need some guidance on the pharmacotherapy as appropriate. Now, at the moment, dentists cannot prescribe or dispense the two drugs that are often used for quitting smoking. The third one, though, the nicotine replacement therapy, which is patches and then chewing gum, patients can buy over the counter. And I know you're all probably wanting to ask them, what about e-cigarettes? I'll come to e-cigarettes right at the end, and it'll fit in quite nicely with what I'm saying here, okay? So at the moment, we're just looking at two potential drugs that can only be prescribed by their doctor, which is Champix and Zyban, or they go to the pharmacy and they buy the nicotine replacement therapy. The one problem we have with nicotine replacement therapy is that people tend not to stay on it long enough. All right, they should be looking at buying a supply for 8 to 12 weeks, whether a light smoker or a heavy smoker, and they need to buy the right quantity depending how much they currently smoke, and that the packages are quite clear on which they should be going for. The idea is they wear a patch for a while, an appropriate sort of level of patch, and then if they get any cravings, they use one of the quick release products such as chewing gum or a nasal spray to get that quick hit of nicotine just to take away those cravings. It still needs all that self-motivation, all that self-control to give up. It's not an easy thing, which is where you come in with your advice. And say, for example, you're providing non-surgical therapy and they're giving up at the same time, those weekly or fortnightly visits to you will make a massive difference. Them to come in and just be allowed to talk about how they're feeling, how difficult it's been, and the empathy they're going to get, and the supportive phrases and body language you use will make all the difference. Okay. Incidentally, it is cheaper if they go through the NHS smoke-free service. They will get either of the drugs, or they'll get the nicotine replacement therapy much cheaper if they go through the service. But if they choose not to do that, or if it's too far away, or if there's problems with the service, then they can do it themselves over the counter. Okay, if they don't want to talk about it, that's absolutely fine. We do not know what's going on in a patient's home life. We do not know where they are mentally, psychologically. So if this is now not their time, that's absolutely fine. And I think what's really important is just accept and acknowledge their opinion. Just say, I fully respect that. Point 3 there suggests patients may want to talk about in the future. The way I tackle this is I say that's absolutely fine, but I'm just wondering, would it be okay if I brought the subject up again sometime in the future? It just helps me to understand where we're at with your oral health and how smoking might be influencing that. Okay, 30 seconds can still be effective, so you don't have to indulge a lot of time with patients. If you've got the time, that's great. And you'll find your very brief advice. We'll talk you through that. But to summarize it, oh, actually, sorry, before I move on, so the NCSCT website, when you go, there are 2 things to look at. One is a document on how dentists, dental hygienists, dental therapists, and the whole dental team can approach smokers, which is very good. It's well worth a read. And then there is the training, which is in the middle here. So you can either go down the sidebar, look for training, and then look for that, or you can just click on that link there and it'll take you straight through. And as I say, it's completely free. And it'll talk you through how easy it is to give in 30 seconds. Okay, if you do pick up that dental document, it briefly goes over Ask, Advise, Act, and it may seem like I'm teaching my granny to suck eggs again, but if I can just quickly point out a few pitfalls here. Everybody tends to get that one right. As I say, watch out for the oscillating smokers. It's this one that most people get wrong. Most people assume that this advice is something along the lines of, you really should not be smoking, it's poor for your health, or it could be affecting your periodontal status, you really need to think about giving up. I would advise you to stop smoking. That's not what it's about. What we should be saying is, are you aware the most effective way of quitting is with medication and behavioural support, which is all free on the NHS at the moment. Okay. And the studies have shown that it's 4 times more likely to sustain a long-term quit if you go through that. That if you have the medication, that's either Zyban, Champix, or nicotine replacement therapy, and alongside that, you have behavioural support. Okay, and that's the only bit of advice that we should be saying. And obviously, say it in a way I advise. I think it doesn't sit comfortably with me to use the words I would advise. I think as hygienists and therapists, we're very good at shoehorning in information like this without sounding like we are telling people what to do, if you like. And then finally, as we discussed, you just act on what they say, and don't forget to put in your clinical notes what patients told you. Okay, a lot of studies telling us that if we are bossy, prescriptive, I would advise, I think you should do this, you should do that, you're a lot less likely to get a behaviour change in most people. Very interesting research done by a team called Halvari and Halvari. They actually looked at oral hygiene advice with different sort of approaches. Quite astonishing that if you want to look that up. So that's Halvari and Halvari. Okay, I kind of prefer the 5 A's. It's easier to do the 3 A's, but for me, just breaking it down like this really helps. I suspect pretty much all of you probably do this automatically anyway. Again, not keen on the word advice. I tend to, rather than tell everybody they should stop smoking, I say, have you ever thought about stop smoking? For me, that's better than, I know it fits in with all the A's, but for me, it's a better way of engaging in a conversation that might be constructive for the patient. Okay, so if you are referring, please consider making that referral yourself. I really push this because the number of people who go home after the conversation with you, and as they leave the building, they're quite keen, they want to move forward. By the time they've got home, or they'll put it off the day after, the actual follow-through rates are much, much smaller than you'd imagine. So you've done the hard work, you've motivated them to think about giving up, and then nothing happens till your next visit. So with their permission, you can actually have the website up behind all your clinical screen, and you literally put in the patient's postcode. It'll tell you who to ring or who to email. They literally want patient's postcode, so they send into the right area, and patient's obviously name and address, and that's it. You can sort of move on from that. If patients aren't keen on you do that, or they want time to think, you could give this. Remember, leaflets about smoking, they're not all that effective. Again, research shows they're not all that, they don't really instigate a quit at all. They can have information on with phone numbers, but on their own, that they just don't work. Okay. So as I say, 4 times more likely to quit with a combination of the face-to-face behavioural support. Better done through NHS Smoke Free, but you could do that yourself. The patient was reluctant. And these are those 3 options. Okay. Zyban and Champix are only available on prescription through a doctor, and nicotine replacement therapy you can buy. Okay. There is another product called Cessation, which is not available in the UK. It's available in Europe, but it hasn't got the MHRA approval yet. Okay. There is something called compensatory smoking, and we tend to see this when people are trying to cut down. And actually, because they're so addicted to the nicotine in cigarettes, what happens is that they have a certain craving, they have a certain amount that they need to take on board. So rather than sort of going through the cravings, what they tend to do is they take a bigger, deeper breath on that cigarette. And the same thing happens if they're using lighter brands. So this is worse for them in a lot of respects. For starters, they're taking the harmful sort of fumes, if you like, deeper into the lungs, but they are still taking the same amount of nicotine and the same amount of tar and all the other harmful products. And this is what we call compensatory smoking. So if an individual is telling you that they're giving up by cutting down, maybe a conversation with them about that. And I've helped patients identify this themselves and sort of say, just be careful of it. This is what it is, and they say, yeah, I think I am doing that. Years ago, we were advised to patients who were cutting down, definitely to get them in, to persuade them to go in to see the smoking cessation service. Yeah, I'm sure they'll still accept people, but as I'll go into later, those services are becoming a little bit more patchy. So whether they bounce them back to you or not, I'm not sure. Okay. There is some evidence that cutting down on a combustible cigarette and replacing it with something like an electronic nicotine device can work. The problem with that is you've still got your patient addicted to nicotine. Okay, thankfully, they're not smoking the cigarettes, which we know are extremely harmful. And that technique used to be called NARS, nicotine assisted reduction to stop. I think they've stopped referring it to that now, to be honest with you. But there are cessations counsellors far more qualified than me who really can help patients work through this. So I used to refer these sort of patients when I could. Okay, just moving on quickly to behavioural support. This might be a good point to actually sort of just point out that people who smoke have an addiction, and an addiction, by most people's count, is a disease. And rather than judge people, it might be wise for us to start looking at things from their point of view, just how difficult these things are to quit. Okay. And maybe self-reflect how we do feel about smokers. How do we feel if we see a pregnant mum outside a hospital smoking? How do we feel about a dad that's driving his kids along in a car while he's smoking inside that car? It takes one cigarette for a smoker to become addicted, and quite often these are young people just experimenting, just having a bit of a laugh with their mates, just trying to be cool. So I think it's probably a good time to just sit and reflect yourselves about how you feel about smokers, and is that going to get in the way of you providing good quality support to your patients? Very few of us are perfect. Very few of us eat everything correctly, drink the right amount of alcohol. So smokers don't just have, if you like, an addiction to the cigarettes. There is a physical habit there as well. And quite often patients will tell you when they're giving up that they struggle a little bit with getting rid of the hand-to-mouth thing, which is why they like maybe an inhalator or e-cigarette, because they're constantly putting something into the mouth. Other people like to use pens. Jokingly, sometimes I suggest a TP or other sort of incidental cleaning product. The desire to satisfy this addiction is massive, and the withdrawal symptoms are very, very unpleasant. So be aware of patients wanting to tell you about this, just telling you what a tough time they're having and giving up, and be there to prepare to give the right sort of response. Okay. So some people find these next 3 or 4 slides very useful. Other people find them a bit of a drag because they feel I am teaching granny to suck eggs, and I do appreciate that. But some people do like a phrase or phraseology to sort of look at. So what do? Well, I tend to sort of say, I tend to sort of almost try and get permission, if you like, to talk about smoking. So I see from your medical history, I wonder if we can talk about it. And if I get a categoric no, that doesn't mean I give up there and then. What I'll say is, oh, it does sound like this is quite an emotive subject for you. Do you often have people wanting to talk about it? And that'll go one of 2 ways. I'll either they'll clamp down again, it'll be a categoric no, and I'll possibly give up at that stage, or they'll say, yeah, my spouse, and I give them the floor. I give them the opportunity to talk. I get them to witness me offering empathetic body language, the nod of the head, the expression on my face. And from that conversation, I can find out an awful lot about the patient, about why they smoke, how they feel about giving up smoking. Is it a confidence thing? Are they not aware of the services that are available to them? Have they tried and thought because they failed in the past, they're not likely to fail again? And I can learn a lot about this. I can see a lot of the barriers that maybe we can talk about, that we can find ways around. And there's other ways of asking the same thing. But this is why I like working with therapists and hygienists, because they just have that inbuilt instinct on what to say and how to say it, really. It's a shame I can't say that for other clinicians, but hey ho, that's another conversation. And I think if you do get permission, you're hardly likely to damage the patient-clinician relationship. Okay. These are other things that when you start to dry up and the conversation is just sort of going a bit quiet, these are things maybe to ask, to sort of prompt another conversation or to prompt thoughts within your patient. What benefits could you see yourself in giving up smoking? You know the benefits, but to get them to talk about the benefits, well, that starts to get some of these neural pathways open. So people are starting to think, yeah, actually, I would feel better. I would be fitter. I would save myself a fortune. Yeah, this perio disease might, we would get some better outcomes. And I think starting to look for barriers, like, have you ever managed to quit in the past? And I think giving people some praise for actually trying to quit. They say it takes on average, a mean average, 3 times for somebody to have an attempt at quitting before they actually manage to succeed. So these are definitely conversations worth having without sort of passing judgment. And actually trying to find out what strategies, what skills they feel they've drawn on in the past. And quite often they'll tell you, oh yeah, but this happened. And then you can turn that round and say, yeah, but at least you now know what the potential trip hazards are, and you can make plans before you even start quitting, how you can get around that. So going on to trip hazards, they'll tell you about stress. Now, what is stress? We all suffer with stress. The stress that smokers often talk about is not stress. It's actually the withdrawal symptoms from nicotine. All right, they start to feel a little bit shaky. They feel on edge. They feel uncomfortable, and they say the only way to satisfy that stress is to have a cigarette, and that they deal with stress better, and they associate any previous stressful situation with having a cigarette and that alleviation of those symptoms. Lots of studies showing that smokers, non-smokers, there's no difference in their stress levels at all, and ex-smokers as well. All right, we all suffer with stress, and maybe something to talk to them about is, can you find alternative ways to alleviate stress, whether it be relaxation techniques, whether it be going for a walk, whether it be taking up some kind of exercise, anything. Okay, and these are conversations worth having. Again, teach them a granny to suck egg. Rather than telling people what to do, inquire how they feel about it, or what strategies have they discovered, and let them explore answers themselves rather than you sort of give them those direct answers. Okay, these are more strategies, getting rid of the smoking paraphernalia. You'd be amazed that just the look of a lighter, an ashtray, so maybe they need to be either popped in the bin or put in a cupboard. I think certainly reining in the support of families and friends is huge. The biggest group of people who actually fail on a quit attempt tend to live with another smoker. So it can be, if the other person in the household doesn't want to give up smoking, it could be that maybe from the outset you say to the other smoker, look, I really want your support on this. Is there any chance you can go outside the house? Not in another room, because eventually all the fumes do filter through and they do get that nicotine from the side stream. But actually say, please, would you mind just for the first 12 weeks going outside to smoke, or only smoking in the pub, and certainly not offering me one, and hiding all your smoking paraphernalia. Okay, everybody's favourite bit, e-cigarettes. Okay. The information that comes about over e-cigarettes is very, very hard to filter. There's an enormous amount of information. A lot of it is false or not worth considering. So it's very hard to actually get through what is the nitty-gritty and what we should be looking at. Okay, so I've done my best, so forgive me if there's information that I haven't had a chance to get to yet. These are not available on the NHS, but the NHS Stop Smoking Service will support people who want to use them. Okay. So when I'm talking about an e-cigarette, I sometimes call them ENDs as well, I'm actually talking about electronic cigarettes, the vaping cigarettes, and in other parts of the world they're called ANDS and VPNS. Okay. What I'm not talking about is the idea of where you heat the nicotine, but you don't actually burn it. I think there's a new product coming out in Singapore. I'm not talking about those, okay? What's in an e-cigarette? Well, it tends to be nicotine within a liquid, and the liquid is either glycerol or propylene glycol, which creates an aerosol, and that aerosol contains nicotine. The first generation e-cigarettes were not very good, and they didn't deliver a very equal amount or very high amount of nicotine, so they tend to fall flat. The second and third generation with the tanks, they do seem to be a lot better. They're a lot better regulated. They get an even amount of nicotine coming through in the aerosol. Okay, so this chap here, Honlick, was accredited with being the first person to market these. He wasn't the first person to design them. It was by a guy called Herbert Gilbert in 1963, and he came up with a theoretical concept. Honlick sort of evolved the same sort of idea. He didn't really copy the design, but he was the one that pushed forward and marketed it, realizing there was a growing market for alternatives to smoking. Okay, and he now works for one of the big tobacco companies producing some of these e-cigarettes. Nobody, no literature anywhere disputes this. And if you go away with any information, this is the one I'd hope you'd go away with, that they are far less harmful than smoking. Okay. However, the extent of the harm is yet to be determined. Now, whether that's coming from the device itself, either the metals in the heating element, the nicotine itself, which is not harmless, although I've seen some literature saying it is, plenty of studies saying, oh no, it isn't, and whether it's people adding things to the chambers like cannabis oil. Okay. However, the NCSCT recommend that practitioners, I think they talk about their smoking cessation advice, but really we should follow suit, should be open to these electronic nicotine devices among smokers if they're trying to quit, particularly if they've tried other methods of quitting and failed. And there is a document on their website that's actually quite good to have a little look at. Okay. So what is it? Well, up until May 16, they were largely unregulated in the UK, and some of them were absolutely dreadful. They were coming in from countries that really had no idea on safety. There was all sorts of things going wrong with them, colorings, flavorings. Some of them were giving off a lot of heavy metal and causing a lot of concern in the medical community. The good news is, in the UK, we have now regulated them. Okay. It hasn't eased the concerns of some, though, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Okay. What is significantly different between an e-cigarette and somebody who goes through the service to give up is that with an e-cigarette, we're still left with somebody who's addicted to nicotine. When they inhale, they take in less nicotine, so there is a potential to cut these things down slowly until they get off. But there's still a large number of people who remain addicted to nicotine and still need to use the e-cigarettes, which is why NICE, oh gosh, let's think of all the other bodies, Public Health England, NCSCT, they all say that really our first port of call should be getting patients to the stop smoking service, whether they still want to use an e-cigarette or not. That should be our first port of call to see if we can get people nicotine free of these products. Okay, moving on. So regulation outside the EU is dreadful. Okay, even some more developed countries, you'd be amazed what's allowed to be sold and to who. In the US, they've got massive problems at the moment because you'd think they'd have very strong legislation about who could sell what to who. A lot of youngsters under the age of 18 getting hold of these vaping things. They tend to be barrels that you can get into and add your own products. And you'll probably remember a year or two ago, we had a huge number of youngsters, and some died. I think it was 2 in the UK, but there was over 500 cases in the US where people, particularly young people, developed lung problems, massive lung problems, and are still left with ongoing lung problems due to vaping. It turned out it was the something in cannabis oil that all these people were taking the canisters apart, adding in cannabis oil, and it was this vitamin E acetate, which is harmless on its own until it's heated up, causing untold irreversible damage to lungs. Okay, the only reason we had 2 cases was because of our regulation in the UK, so that's kind of reassuring. Outside the UK, EU as well, we tend to find that there's no regulation of harmful flavourings. Don't know if you're aware of the phrase popcorn lung. This is the cause of that, that's diacetyl. And it's actually a flavouring they use in popcorn. And they started to discover that were people working in popcorn factories, those that were near the vats that heated up some of the popcorn flavourings, particularly the butter flavourings and butterscotch and toffee flavourings. Did you know there's no butter in them? It's all just chemicals. And they were causing lung conditions called bronchiolitis obliterans, or popcorn lung. The media again blew it up out of all proportion. But the good news is now in the UK there are regulation on flavourings. Personally, I still have a concern that there is flavourings in there. I don't think there should be. What other flavourings you might find in e-cigarette that can cause problems and known to cause problems are butter, caramel, pina colada, strawberry. Okay, moving on. So how are they regulated? Well, the BMJ actually did a very interesting article lately, and they looked at this WHO survey, this World Health Organization survey, who contacted 90 countries, only 90 countries, and the article couldn't work out why, and I can't work out why. And they asked them how they were labeling these electronic nicotine devices. Some countries had them as a medical device, some were a therapeutic device, and some were a consumer product. There were some countries that banned them altogether, 22 in total, and some countries that labelled and controlled them as a toxic substance, for example, Australia. Okay. So it's interesting because the legislation around all of those will, in each country, will be completely different, and how they're monitored, how they're regulated, how they are legalised is a whole different thing. In India, I was reading the other day, they completely banned e-cigarettes altogether, and a fine for using them could be imposed on you up to £1,000, which is a lot of money in India for a lot of people, but also you could be put in prison for up to a year. So they're really, really strict out in India. Interesting point to note, India is the second largest country that produces tobacco leaf in the world, and far be it from me to be the cynic and saying maybe they're protecting their tobacco industry. Hey ho. You don't have to read all of those. It's just giving you an idea of how many things that are put through. So the MHRA, this is what regulates our medicines in the country. They have now got complete control over everything that declares itself a nicotine product. That was what came out in 2016. It was updated 2017. This is probably one of the best things that's ever happened for smokers in the UK. And what's really good about the MHRA is we've got this yellow card system. All right, you can, if you are concerned about a product, monitored and looked at by the MHRA, you can report back on the yellow card system. They are still allowing flavourings though, and that does worry me. Okay. This statement by Public Health England, if you agree with the first statement, the second one has been lambasted. If you read literature from other countries, they say the statistics, the studies looked at and the interpretation of is poppycock, and this 95% really should be scowled at. Opinion of other people in various journals around the world, you know, sort of health experts. Either way, we just don't know. There are other people who question the value of e-cigarettes. This lovely lady, Sally Davis, previous chief medical officer, she, in an article, I was reading last week, she was worried that this is a ticking time bomb. So I'm really glad we've got the regulations in this country. Personally, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see them stop being sold in corner shops, in sweet shops, and newsagents, in supermarkets. I'd like to see them sold through pharmacies only, so they're associated with other medicines as a support to giving up, and it's a lot harder for youngsters to go in and take them. And I think your pharmacist is a lot more likely to be responsible than a shopkeeper, my opinion. And I'd like to see the removal of all flavourings. I cannot see the point of having flavouring in an e-cigarette if you are using them to give up. Okay. This professor, now she wrote this report for the World Health Organization. If you're bored one night, you can't get to sleep, it's worth a good read, but actually it's very well laid out. It is very good. When you read it, please remember that she's looked at electronic cigarettes worldwide. It's not just UK. She's actually Danish, if I remember rightly. This is her here. Another than report to World Health Organization, and she works in hospitals, so she's wet-fingered sort of doctor as well. And she lambasted the UK. Now this was in response to Public Health England saying that flavours help adult smokers switch to less harmful products, and that by removing flavours would likely provoke vapers to relapse back to smoking. In turn, more adult role models for young people, which is the key driver for young people to start to smoke. So that's Public Health England said that's why they don't want to remove the flavours. Because they feel that adults would relapse back to smoking if we remove the flavours. And also if people are going to go back to smoking, then it's a poor role model for young people to start to smoke. How do you feel about that? And that, again, that's on the last page, this sort of link here. Because the links, actually, I might get Chris to send them out to you, to be truthful. Easier to pick. BMA are concerned again that they are marketed to children if you look at the flavours of them. And they are sold in sweetie shops. Who Bulletin, this was 2017, and they have said several times the degree of harm is very, very uncertain. Okay. If you look at e-cigarette, the one thing that is good about them is we know you're not getting the carcinogens from cigarettes, but what carcinogens do we get from the e-cigarette, we don't know. But you can graze on them, and that seems to make a big difference for people. They do seem to be able to come down on their nicotine intake because they'll have a couple of puffs rather than try and finish off a whole cigarette. We know they give less nicotine into the blood system, so slowly it's easier, and they satisfy cravings slightly quicker than the NRT products. There's lots of evidence that say that the people around an e-cigarette smoker are not being harmed at all by the nicotine that's been released. Lots of sound studies supporting that. The objections, which I think I've probably covered, yeah, it normalises smoking. Are we providing role models for youngsters, saying that, you know, to this hand-mouth thing, it looks cool to sort of smoke an e-cigarette, get them addicted, and then, you know, we've got another health problem there. The big question when you do read these papers and these articles is, are these youngsters that are starting vaping, would they have gone on to just smoke anyway? And separating that out is tough. In the UK, Public Health England says it's not really significant, the numbers are small. Anecdotally, I'd say that's not true, but who am I to argue with Public Health England? There is a problem with people using them if they've got cardiac problems, and if you talk to patients, maybe get their GP to have a little look if they've got cardiac problems. And the ethical problem, do we support something yet that we don't have full knowledge of harm? And that's interesting, isn't it? Only you can answer that one. So are these effective as the traditional smoking methods? So your tablets and your NRT, if that's what you could go down, and obviously behavioural support. The evidence for this is very thin, actually. I think they agree that ENDS is the most popular method. But however, the primary method, where we have the pharmacological agent behavioural support, is still the most effective, and that's what we should be supporting first and foremost. And I feel as a profession, we don't always do this. This one's too easy. And I think considering we have such a high calibre of clinicians within our profession, I'd love to see this be supported more. If patients won't go to the service, I know just about every hygienist or therapist I meet can provide that behavioural support. Okay, so if you do plough through any of the NCSCT, you don't have to read all of this. So they've done studies on trying to get people to quit with e-cigarettes and non-e-cigarettes, and there's very little data, but the one that they did say from the UK was they're no more likely to quit than non-e-cigarette users. So jury's still out, I feel. Okay. A couple of years ago, there was a rant and a rave going on in the local press, or in the general press, I think, because somebody suggested that e-cigarettes should be available on prescription. So a few good points were made. Well, we've actually got an alternative, so why would we then put e-cigarettes as an option? And this lady you probably recognise off the TV, David Mitchell's wife, presenter in her own right as well, I think. And she's saying, why are we listening to the vape manufacturers? 2018, Altria, they're the tobacco company that produces Marlboro and a couple of others. They spent $13 billion on a stake in Juul, which is one of the biggest electronic nicotine devices. Okay, she might have a point. Okay. The biggest issue here is that the stop smoking service is being cut. That's the real shame. And you may find locally it's very hard to refer people in. I think, where does it leave us, other than it being a total travesty? It means we may well be having to support our patients behaviour-wise and suggesting that they perhaps try the nicotine replacement therapy. And if they don't want to go for that, then it's going to be cigs. Okay. It's costing us a small fortune. Don't get me ranting about this. That's just treating patients, 2.7 billion. It's another 11 billion cost to the economy. All right. Shocking, absolutely shocking. And the amount we spend, I was only reading the one of the papers that the Public Health Wales produced, and they were looking at the amount they'd spent on prescribing these drugs, Champix and Zyban, compared to how much it was costing them to put people in hospital, and it just beggars belief that there's not more push there. Okay, and we've still got this sad statistic every year in the UK. Oh, that's just in England. Sorry, that's England. Sorry, that was UK statistic. Compare that to COVID. Shocking. Okay, and that's for every year. So if I manage to persuade one of my patients who smokes to quit, that's £1,000 a year for the rest of their life. So if they live for another 30, 40 years, that's £40,000 that we can save. And I personally believe, all right, it's the responsibility that every one of us who can deliver good quality smoking cessation support and who can refer and remind patients of the benefits of quitting. And the most effective way of doing so, do take some kind of civil and professional responsibility for this. So that's me done. So I'm going to hand over to Chris in a moment. I'm just going to put that last slide up. So you can either photograph it or screenshot it, or whichever way is best for you. And then I'm hoping that Chris is around and he's going to deliver me some questions. I can see 2 on here already. I can't hear, Chris. Are you all right too?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Great, excellent. That was excellent. Thank you very much. So yeah, so there's a couple of little questions there. I don't know if you've seen them. Someone has asked, Helen, if you know if the quit text number also applies to Wales.
It's a good question because Wales have their own quit service, and I do apologise I haven't got it to hand. If you ever want to download documents, go to Wales first. They have really moved forwards. I'm just trying to, is it quit 2, I think, the Welsh number. I'm really sorry, Helen. I'm going to suggest you actually look that up online. I do apologise. I actually gave a presentation in Wales, and it's all on another presentation. I just haven't got it to hand. Tell you what I will do, as soon as this presentation is finished, I'll get the number to Chris and he'll get it to you, and with as much details as I can about the Welsh service to quit. But I think in general context, they're absolutely superb, the Welsh guys. They've come up with a lot of good stuff, a lot of good documents. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. If you can send the links across, what we'll do, we'll put them on the BADT page as well for members. So we'll put a smoke and cessation section there with all the links and where you can get further advice and, for example, the free NHS course that you can do as well. Does anyone have any questions before we go? I see, let's just check. I see Kirsty has just raised a hand. Do you have any questions, Kirsty? Someone's put, if you don't mind me asking, who did you do your smoke and cessation advice through?
I did mine through the NCSCT. I did stage 1 and stage 2, but there has been a problem with my registration, I have noticed. So I couldn't find myself on the thing at all. So it's something I need to chase up. Now, when I did stage 2, it wasn't available to other people online. It was in the very, very early stages. And I've got a funny feeling that mine is on paper rather than being put on screen. So I do need to contact them and ask me to put them on screen. But I've got nothing but praise for the NCSCT, I'll be honest with you. I think they're absolutely superb. I have dabbled with others, shall we say, and I'm not going to mention them because it sounds like a recommendation, and I don't think anybody matches NCSCT.
Great. And question from Kirsty. Can you quickly say again what flavourings in cigarettes can cause?
Well, there's diacetyl. That's the one that causes what we commonly know as popcorn lung, the bronchiolitis. And there was concern over some of the others, wasn't there? There was strawberry, caramel, butter. There's concern over those, but we know definitely that acetyl. And then the cannabis oil that contains vitamin E acetate, that was causing problems in the US.
Right, yeah. Excellent. I think that's all the questions that have came through now. Obviously, if anyone does have any questions, if they want, they can re-look over the video on that and give us a shout if you do have any other questions. But thank you for joining us today. Obviously, thank you once again, obviously, to Action for supporting the platform. Thank you very much to Joe. And after this webinar, it should automatically put you to a SurveyMonkey link to fill out your feedback form. Once you've filled that out, we'll get those feedbacks and then issue the certificates. But please bear with us for the certificates because we have to do them all manually at the moment. Just double checking there's no other questions came through. No, that's fine. So thank you very much. Remember, we also have Jocelyn Harden this week discussing and talking about cancer collaboration and care, and that's on Thursday. I believe that is at 2 p.m.
That would be really good. I've listened to Jocelyn talk. She's exceptional, absolutely exceptional.
Yeah.
Put that in your diary.
Lovely as well. Yeah. But what we'll do over the next couple of days, we'll get these links, etc., put onto the BADT members section as well for you. So thank you very much, and thanks again, Joe. And
no problem.
We'll be around. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks again. I'll get that slide to you, Chris. Okay, I'll do it just now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.